Hello, everyone. We are back again. This is American Coin and Currency live podcast. We're here every week. Excuse me. We're here every week, 1 p.m. Eastern. Thursdays, we have a special guest, Christopher Bullfinch. Thanks for being here, Christopher. John Mady, CEO, founder of American Coin and Currency, is Dustin Lee, head of social media. And this is a great conversation this week. We're going to be focusing on how auctions change the price of coins in the hobby. We have Christopher Bullfinch as a specialist in the industry working with Doyle. Christopher Bullfinch is a numismatist and consultant appraiser specializing in rare coins, banknotes, stamps at Doyle Auctioneers and Appraisers, a legacy New York auction house where high-end collections where are we at? Sorry. Rare coins and established material come to market. He has worked across auction houses, numismatic publications with deep focus on market trends, historical significance, and collectible valuation. His expertise bridges a gap between the academic history of coinage and the real-world mechanics of the auction market, making him the perfect guest for tonight's topic. So, yeah, it's fantastic to have you here, Christopher. Excited to hear your expertise on the industry and see how things are going on with you.
Well, thanks so much. That's a very generous introduction, and I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Chris. John, how's it going?
Oh, things are great. Thank you, Chris, for being a part of our show. We absolutely love having well-informed individuals like yourself who really know the markets, and I'm sure that our viewers are going to get a nice piece of education today, which is something we're always trying to provide. So thank you so much for coming on today.
My pleasure, and that's a generous appraisal, if you'll forgive a slant pun.
Yeah, it's always excited to have guests that are in a niche or expertise or anyone that's that can add value to the show, because it's just like we have so much to.
Sure, and Chris sees so much, and that's what's fascinating. Like I doing what we do here, I see a certain amount of the market, but Chris gets to see and be a part of and actually hold in his hands like real historical artifacts, more so than just numismatics and banknotes. And to me, there's something special about holding history in your hands, that tangible. I've said it before. There's a feeling that at least I get when I hold something that's historical, has a great story behind it, and I'm a little jealous that you get to see and hold and be a part of those things.
I'm very fortunate. Doyle Auctions is primarily fine art and jewelry. I'm the coin specialist within the auction house. Something that I love about the role, which I've been in for a little over a year now, I'm fascinated by history. I major in history in college. I find both the sort of professional and academic study of history fascinating, as well as being able to bring some of that to bear in the coin world and in a auction context. But I absolutely love being able to work with specialists across a really wide range of material. I've learned an enormous amount about a whole range of fine art categories. And to your point about sort of being awed by material that you've encountered. Right now, actually, in our Boston gallery, I'm speaking to you guys from Boston, Massachusetts. I work at Doyle's gallery up here. I'm from the greater Boston area, so it made sense for me to work out of this satellite office that we have. And we have a full gallery, too. We have an 18th century desk that belonged to Paul Revere. It was one of, a number of pieces of furniture came out of his estate. We actually got it from a descendant, a direct descendant of Paul Revere. And, having material like that, we had a sketch by Picasso in a recent sale. We had a tapestry from Alexander Calder. Some really fascinating stuff comes through, and being able to sort of branch out and learn about a whole different range of collectibles and art, and collectible. Calling it collectible art feels like you're sort of mixing terminology a little bit, but I've been absolutely fascinated. So, and it's fun to just be around the material day to day, and you can learn a huge amount. Like you said, there's an experience. You can experience the object in a certain way that is really rewarding.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. There's I get the same feeling, and I'm sure in many aspects you have the same feeling when you you get a call from out of the blue, someone has an estate and they need appraisals done, and it's like a treasure hunt. Sometimes it's a bust, but sometimes you do find treasure, and that's when it makes it all worth it. And it's just from not even a monetary standpoint, but from a historical standpoint, and having the privilege of being able to physically, like in the case of the furniture, sit there or feel it, touch it. There's a connection to the past, and that's profound to me, at least, and I think to Dustin and you as well. So yeah, it's very interesting. We're gonna have a great conversation today, so I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, I love that.
Absolutely.
I love that. It's good to like at least you find like the treasures in life, and like always being like kind of like on your toes, I guess, in some sense, like running into things I've probably never seen, others have never seen it, or like something in the private collection that hasn't been released ever. Maybe someone passed away, some type of collection.
Yeah.
Some error. Yeah, so that's like.
And I mean, and we're so lucky to be able to play a role as stewards of these objects, right? Whether it's stewarding through the auction process or just connecting it to an owner who's really going to deeply appreciate it, help people build collections, help people realize value out of collections that already exist. All of that, the notion of stewardship is something that I think a lot about, and not only caring for the objects physically, but, presenting them in a certain light, trying our best to understand what makes them collectible or what makes them historically valuable. Not just in terms of, as you said, John, not just in terms of monetary value, but in terms of their historic significance, and and exploring that and exploring how those things relate to each other. I mean, I have to assume that smarter people than me have written tomes about that, but it's fascinating, and I take that role seriously, certainly, and I know you guys do too. So it's certainly fun to chat with folks who have that sort of appreciation for it.
Sure. And what fascinates me is that, and excites me when I wake up in the morning, is I don't know what I'm walking into each day. Yeah. And by that, I mean, you just don't, like, for example, I recently received a phone call from a lawyer who was representing a wealthy family. And he told me that the customer was a older woman, late 80s, and she had some really significant coins. Among them, one of them was I believe, 1849 $10 Mormon gold piece. And I mean, we're talking, if that was, I haven't received it yet. I'm still working on that process, but that's a treasure. Like, that's a true treasure. If you read the history of the Mormons and Dave Smith and them being persecuted in the East and then moving out West and finally settling in Salt Lake City. And then, Dave Smith, they created their own currency, which was going to be backed by gold, which they did not have yet at that time. But lo and behold, they did eventually, find some gold, and they built this prospering community that still survives to this day, obviously. But it's just, you just never know what's out there, who's out there. And so that excites me, because there's just so many more treasures that are sitting in someone's, it could be an attic, it could be in a vault, it could be, safe deposit box, who knows where, but there's just still so much out there and a lot of it hasn't seen, like Dustin said just a second ago, hasn't seen the light of day, sometimes for decades. Right. That to me is very exciting. And I think we're going to see more of that coming to market as time goes on.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And that's, and that treasure hunt aspect, I think it certainly animates people who collect, it animates coin collectors, in the sense that, folks are trying to put together their sets, they're trying to upgrade pieces within their sets, they might be assembling a registry set, whatever their collecting goal is. And, part of the fun of it is going to shows and going to shops and sort of keeping your eye out. But dealers and auctioneers certainly get to experience a version of that. Like, I'll be digging through, a massive collection might come in, and I might think, oh, a lot of this material might not even make sense for auction. It might be something that I have to make a direct purchase offer on. So we sort of use a hybrid model. I should say I use a hybrid model. I set the department policy, and that's how I generally approach things. And I might say, oh, all right, this might be a direct buy, and okay, we make a little bit of money on it. But then you find the one thing or the multiple great things in a collection and like being able to be surprised is really nice. I mean, that is an underrated aspect of certain jobs, right? Is like if you do the same thing every single day, I imagine it might get a little bit stale. But you never know what's going to happen. And I'm also thrilled to be in a job where I get to learn something every day. I mean, people have done this for 80 years and they're not done learning. They'll find some new little tidbit that they hadn't encountered, or they'll see an evolution in the market that they hadn't necessarily expected. And I mean, what a wonderful thing. I mean, I think of myself as a curious person. I certainly appreciate that quality in others. And, like I said, I'm never done learning, and I'm grateful for the opportunity every day to learn a little bit more, to get a little bit better, to see something I haven't seen before, meet folks someone I haven't met. It's a wonderful industry to work in. So I've certainly been grateful for the opportunity.
Oh, I agree. The education never ends, and every day I learn something new, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm just like you. I'm one of these people that I just want to learn and there's never enough. And it thrills me when I learn something new, whether it's antique, or a coin related, or you fill in the blank. That is always exciting. So yeah, I'm on the same page as you.
All right, let's get into it, guys. Before we start the show, I mean, our intro's always long. Not just you. We always take sometimes 20 and 30 minutes for intros just to cover what's going on. It's just so.
That's how you know it'll be a robust conversation, right?
Yeah, we get like two or three questions. Like it's just.
I know it's good. Awesome.
All right, well, let's go. All right, let's get in. We have to get our sponsor real quick, and then we'll cover it here. Let's see. So you guys, this week's sponsor is Fast Checks. Thanks Fast Checks for joining us again for another sponsor for this week. If you guys don't know Fast Checks, they're e-check business, and the biggest thing in 2026 is that we're still having to deal with this snail mail checks, 5 days to clear, and it just takes forever, and it's in 200 years. And 2006 is here, so we definitely want to speed up the process if you guys are purchasing large orders, and e-checks are obviously the way to go. Fast checks is a way to clear your money a lot faster, that's for sure. And the difference is that you don't have to download any software, buy any special ink, or do anything like that, or navigate through any Fortune 500 companies to obviously print out some e-checks. E-checks or fast checks is generally simple. You just register, enter your details, enter your bank information in real time, and you can print out like a regular check essentially in your printer. And this is done under 1 minute, which is completely free. No credit cards. Just go to fastchecks.io. Basically, if you guys are wanting to do an e-check really quick, no problem. You can do 5 checks a week, or not a week, but a month, free. But they do have plans for 20 e-checks a month as well for $29.95. So if you guys are, in the 2026 and want to purchase a collection, e-checks obviously is a way to go. So go check out fastchecks.io, and that is fastchecks.io. Thank you, fastchecks.io, for sponsoring us this week. Appreciate you guys. So back to the show. Appreciate you, Fast Checks. All right, let's get into it. Appreciate you, Christopher, for being here. I know there's a lot of going on in like the pricing and the market when it comes to coins, and that's like the biggest tall tale when you see like auction houses, selling $10 million coins, or eBay listings going just ballistic. You can see Doyle. I'm sure you guys are pushing the envelope as well on your guys' end too. What do you see some of those results affecting like the fair market price when it comes to coins?
It depends on the kind of coin, of course. I mean, years ago, auctioning pre-33 gold, using that as an example, made a lot more sense than it might today, because with the gold prices being as strong as they've been, I mean, in a lot of cases, it might make more sense for the consignor for me to purchase that directly than to put it into an auction. I'm using that as an example to suggest that movements in the precious metals market affects what makes sense to consign. And as far as what's coming to market, I mean, there are a lot of folks trying to capitalize on really strong precious metals prices, which makes a lot of sense. And then for the more collectible side of the market, we deal in such a wide range of material that I end up entering markets at different times. We had an incredibly rare French essay in my last sale that was actually near unique. So that's a coin where it's kind of hard to assess the strength of the market, because an example of a full 1868 French 5 franc gold essay actually hasn't crossed the block that I could find basically since digital records started being kept. So there's some markets that are a little bit trickier to evaluate. But a lot of what Doyle does is we cover a really wide range of clientele, but we do a lot of estate and trust work too. So folks will bring collections that were assembled, either their own collections or collections that were assembled by family members, as they deal with either a family member's passing, or if they're just trying to figure out how to they might have inherited this material and not know exactly what they want to do with it. So the material we handle is varied, and so it gives me a sense of the market in different areas.
What's the popular? I'm looking at the excuse me, at the gold franc right now. What's the population on that?
One at PCGS, one at NGC. Ours, the specimen 62. I sent it in for grading. Actually, I had that graded. It came out of an estate down in your neck of the woods. Then I came out of Boca Raton. PCGS population 1. Ours is the 62, and then there's a 64 in the NGC census. And I dug through. I spent hours on coin archives just looking for results. And interestingly, I found that 2 partial essays, so obverse and reverse impressions on basement, I believe copper die trials, a couple of those crossed the block in the mid 2010s, which gave me an inkling. I mean, of course, it's something that's that rare. It's hard to determine exactly what it's worth, but it's certainly the other denominations of 10, 20, 50, 100 franc. Those have those have sold in the last 20 years a number of times. So that gave me a sense of, I based the pricing more on that than on the uniface impressions, because they're just such distinct. The uniface impressions are interesting pieces, but they're so distinct from the full gold essay that I use the other denominations a little bit more than I use the partials. So it's a population of 2, to answer your question.
Beautiful coin, absolutely beautiful.
Oh, it was a fascinating find.
And it is fun to go through old records. I enjoy doing that. I try to collect old books, old auction records. I have a few that date back to the turn of the last century. Price guides that were sent out by to Wells Fargo to their branches, one out in California, in case people came in to sell. I guess at that point they would actually buy some coins, and the prices in these books. It's fascinating when you see like a $1794 and it's priced in there for a few $1,000s. As opposed to now, maybe seven, maybe 8 figures.
Right.
But that I enjoy that as well. It can be frustrating trying to find comps. I run into that as well quite often. And not everything is on the internet. Sometimes you literally have to go through dusty old pamphlets and books to find that information, and that's
Absolutely.
that could be hair pulling and it can be enjoyable. It depends on the outcome.
For sure. No, I'm with you 100%. That type of archival research is really, really valuable. Whether it's tracing provenance or whether you're just trying to get a sense for the market. And to your point, digging through, I get a real kick out of the old price list, just because you start to fantasize about how great it would be to be able to buy coins at those prices, and the prices that were being offered a long time ago, even adjusted for inflation. But it's something I also really enjoy about looking at old auction catalogs is you can kind of get a sense for not only the way that different firms operated, but sort of even in some of the more imaginative catalogers, you can even kind of get a sense of their personality by reading their descriptions. Like, I really enjoy the sort of digging through old numismatic history, and the auction catalogs can tell you a lot, not only about the coins themselves, but a little bit about how the coin industry functioned, decades or even centuries ago.
Good point.
Yeah, that leads us to our next question. Being that, I'm sure a lot of people don't know how the auctions work. You know, it's not just like the coin just shows up and it sells. Like, what is kind of like the process behind it? Like, you know, from like consignment to, you know, the sale of the auction itself.
Sure. So my process involves, identifying the property, whatever it is. Sometimes people bring me an individual coin. Sometimes people will bring me hundreds, if not thousands, of coins all in one group. I'm cataloging a massive group of metals right now from all different decades. They're mainly U.S. metals, but they came to me in a giant bag, and it's like, okay, so you pull it apart, and then you create food groups. You identify what you identify what different things are. If you want to make group lots, depending on the value of what you have, you can do that. But to make it concrete in the context of the process, the property comes to me in whatever form, whether it's an individual coin or a large group. We agree to terms, sign the relevant paperwork. And so then from there, it comes to me to, turn everything into lots. And some coins make sense as individual lots. Some coins, make sense as group lots. Some metals might make sense as group lots, tokens, paper currency, whatever the material is. I make lots that feel appropriate. You try to get a certain amount of value in each lot. You don't want a lot that's, you're not going to sell a coin that's only worth $20 in an auction lot, right? That doesn't really make any sense. You might do that on an online sales platform. You see that kind of thing. For in the context of an auction house, you want a certain amount of value in an individual lot. And then, from there, I write a catalog description, which is where the research element that we've been talking about, where the research element comes in, is figuring out, not only what the thing is, giving some appraisal of its condition, if it's relevant to delve into the history, if that helps you sell the coin, or if that makes the coin more desirable, or helps to place it in a context that a collector or someone else might find interesting. You do that. And you include, again, depending on the coin, you include population data. I don't tend to do that. I'm not going to do that for a, relatively common date slabbed Morgan necessarily, because nobody needs to know that there's 2,000 other examples in this grade. No one needs to, and that might not even be a coin to auction. That's a different question. I think we'll get to that in a second. So then you do that, and then generate an estimate. You look at comps. You try to figure out a reasonable sense of what these things typically sell for. And of course, if you have something that's unique or near unique, then you don't really know what the market for it is. The 1868 French essay that we were discussing earlier that I sold in my last sale is a great example. And we were discussing the Hawaiian postal money orders before the show, another unique item. So, and in some cases, and so then at that point, you have to find comparable items that are, maybe not identical to the piece, and you can try to get a sense for what a similar item might sell for, which is where I come to have deep appreciation for my colleagues in Doyle's various fine arts departments, because in a lot of cases, there may be prints of a given painting, but if you have one individual painting, no other painting is exactly like that one. Of course, like I said, reproductions and prints and things like that, but and so those are in some ways harder to price, where you have to get a sense for what comparable works from the same artist sold for. What period of this artist's work is it? How well is it executed? How well is it preserved? So, that's a whole, again, that's not germane to coins, but I share that to suggest that if you have really rare items, you kind of have to go slightly further afield to find information by which to price it.
Interesting.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah,
It did. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a lot of.
It's a process. It's a process for sure. And what I find, I buy, and I've worked with other auction houses out there. Excuse me. What I really love is the descriptions, and it's a real talent to that some people have, and I'm sure you do as well, because the description, when you send out a catalog or however it's sent out, that really sells the coin, and the verbiage that's used and the words that are used. And sometimes I'm reading this and it's like, wow, whoever wrote this, they're like wordsmiths, right? It's just that makes all the difference to me when I'm reading it, because that if you're a buyer, that's, the way that's written is going to make you want that even more so. So that, I would imagine, is so important on your side of getting that in there. And I'm, back in the years ago, we didn't have AI to assist with that. I'm not sure if you guys use that or other auction houses do. I know I would if I had to if I had to write a lengthy description. I mean, I can only go so far with my limited vocabulary, but Yeah, that's something that's always, I've always had admiration for the people in those departments that are able to use words to build a mental, even though it's the photo of the coin, but still build that mental image of the coin before they have it, or a photo.
I joke with my friends sometimes that reading an auction catalog and then having to write auction descriptions myself has been an interesting exercise in color theory, because if you're describing toning, you could say blue or you could say cobalt, you could say peach or apricot or light red. It's just funny the range of. I joke with people. I'm like, well, I'm not exactly sure I don't know how I would describe vermilion as a color. Like I don't, it's a limitation of my own vocabulary. I'm using that as an example to suggest that, to your point, really skilled catalogers, really skilled catalogers can do that and can be very precise. And that's actually one area that I've been fortunate to have started my career, working on the hobby media side of things. I first worked at Coin World magazine. I worked for Coin Week. I've contributed to Numismatics, Numismatic News, PCGS Coin Market Report, a few other places.
Wow.
And starting out in that world, I couldn't have known it at the time necessarily, or maybe I wasn't thinking in those terms at the time, but it certainly has, impressed upon me the importance of being precise. There's certainly cases where, my editor might send something back to me and say, hey, you were basically right, but this, you might have missed this little shade of nuance, or you might have missed this sort of shade of meaning in a either word choice, or, you might, if you're trying to describe the mintages of things, you need to distinguish between business strike or proof mintage, or, if you're looking at the population data of, on a third party grading website, you need to make sure that you're looking at the right column. There's a whole range of different things that you need to be, it's important to be precise. And catalogers, journalists, anybody makes mistakes, and, amending the catalog up until the point of sale is always something that one can do. But you strive to be accurate, and you strive to, research these things as thoroughly as you can. And so I certainly, I don't fancy I fancy myself nothing more than a workaday writer, but it's, writing professionally certainly gave me a set of skills and an approach to it that has served me pretty well. So, I definitely encourage, folks who have some talent for writing or have been able to practice it either academically, professionally, or otherwise, honing writing skills is a valuable thing. And, it also helps if you're going to use AI, you definitely need somebody to fact check it. You definitely need somebody to, go back over it and make sure that it's what it's saying is accurate, because, it can be very good. It can be very helpful. I find it most helpful just for basic factual queries. So instead of having to, dig out an obscure book on a series, I might just go into the auction archive and research it myself, or I might say, what year did X happen? And in some cases that's easier than having to go, than even having to dig through different Google results. Right. So
Right.
that to me, it's for basic factual stuff is where it speeds up research, really, is what I find. That's the, what I tend to use it for. And there are other use cases, but that's just my own.
Sure.
Yeah.
Interesting.
A lot of value there for sure.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean there's a lot going behind the scenes when it comes to the auctions for sure. And I know I mentioned earlier about some of the auctions, like we had with the 1794 flowing dollar, right? Sold for $10 million. And it's constantly finding these little pockets where the price reaches beyond. Do you see where auction houses are accurately adding to that kind of pricing tool when it comes to gauging the whole market? Are they pushing the envelope? Or are they kind of is it market manipulation? Is it is it eBay? Is it what is what do you see auction houses are they really adding that next price discovery when it comes to the coins?
Yeah, prices realized at auction houses, I think, are very useful data points. I wouldn't necessarily encourage anybody to think of them as the end all be all, because auction houses generally serve specific markets, and where a dealer might, well, I'll put it in sort of simple and concrete terms. A dealer might have an interest in a bag of circulated common date buffalo nickels. That's not something I'm necessarily going to auction, right? And so the dealer's price for that is not, my auction results aren't going to be relevant to that at all, because that's not necessarily what I'm selling.
Right.
And as far as whether or not auction prices realized are an accurate reflection of a coin's value in the market, I would say yes, in the sense that it offers a snapshot. It offers you a piece of data. I tend to think of it in terms of a word I think I'm probably going to come back to is density. That if you have a lot of auction results over a period of time that cluster around a certain amount of value, that's just better evidence for what the coin is worth, right? And of course, you get outliers. You'll have, an auction where you might have an incredibly motivated buyer that hadn't necessarily participated in auctions in the past. You might have, a coin that has some remarkable distinguishing characteristic that a certain buyer noticed, or a handful of buyers noticed, that ends up sending the price skyrocketing. I mean, there are outlier results, but auctions give you a good sense as to where they can give you some insight into wholesale and retail pricing. I say retail, I mean, again, I'm using those terms a little bit loosely only because it's not a retail price per se, but it's also somewhat higher than you might expect to be paid for a dealer. If you brought a comparable coin to a dealer might pay you more conservatively, which is not a knock on dealers. It's to say that they don't necessarily have access to the same audience that an auction house does. So yeah,
true.
Again, there's a lot to unpack within that question. But
it's a loaded question for sure.
I tend to think of, I guess my succinct answer would be that I tend to think of auction results as important and valuable data points, but I would certainly, in terms of pricing, it's important to look at a range of things.
Yes, absolutely. And to your point, we use auction results and prices all the time, and it's a double-edged sword. Sometimes you can have a weak auction, and the price, just a coin might not sell for what it really should. So the buyer really, let's say, made out on that because there wasn't a lot of interest in that auction in particular, or whatever the case may be. A lot of people didn't participate in the auction. So where on the flip side of that, you can have an auction where there's a ton of people that participate and a coin sells for more than it might have regularly on just an average auction. And so when we look at auction results, because when we deal in higher end coins, we like to supply that information to customers if they don't already have it, and say, hey, look, in 2019, this coin sold at Doyle for this amount. This coin sold at HA for this amount, or Stacks, or wherever it may be. And so it is a snapshot at that time of what the general value of that piece is or was, but it's definitely not the end all be all. But it is also it's a true representation of a value of anything is what someone is willing to pay for it. So when that hammer strikes and the auction is finished, that is a snapshot at that time of that's what the representation of the value of that piece. And 2 years later, that coin might sell for more money, and it might sell for less. It depends on the auction. And so there's a lot of variables there, but that information is invaluable to have as a dealer. And so that's why it's great. A lot of this is readily available, to us to find past auction prices, and that helps us greatly.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I know that's if I'm buying things over the counter, or over the counter, so to speak, if I'm making a direct offer, I mean, I do the same thing. I mean, I use, and that's also a helpful way to develop auction estimates. I mean, as you can look at what these things have realized in the past. So it's helpful for dealers buying. It's helpful for catalogers putting estimates on. It's invaluable data.
Yep.
Yeah, with the Doyle, I'm sure you've seen like some crazy price swings. Like what are some of like the most like drastic, price that you've seen, like a huge gap between pre-sale and hammer price?
Sure. Last year we had the Carol Frost Ross collection of ancient Roman coins. She was a Latin teacher in New Haven, Connecticut. And over the course of about 15, 20 years, basically from the 80s through about the late 90s, early 2000s, she put together a really nice collection of ancient Roman Republican and imperial issues. And she had an Aureus of Brutus, which is an exceptionally rare ancient coin with a fantastic backstory. I mean, stories and storytelling are central to what we do, right? I mean, these things wouldn't have any value whatsoever if we weren't able to make meaning and situate them in a proper context, which involves storytelling, involves narrative on some level. And I mean, the Aureus of Brutus is a fabulous story, which we can get into if you want. But I estimated the coin at 100 to 150. It hammered for 260, which meant that with 21%, that's about $315,000. So I was obviously thrilled with that. That was in some ways a difficult coin to estimate just because they don't cross the block all that often. And it was a lot of fun to do some research on it, to track its pedigree back through a couple of sales. The French essay that we've been discussing. I mean, I think I had that for 10 to 20 and it sold for 27.5, a hammered for 27.5 if I recall. So obviously a result I was happy with. On a more obscure level, and this is something that I have encountered a good bit at Doyle, is we had a medal, a Sorolla medal, which was the Hispanic Society of New York used to award this to various people, donors or researchers who had, made some use of the society or were operating in the field. And we had a silver, very rare silver Sorolla medal. And it was presented in 1937, and it came with a letter signed by Archer Huntington, a name probably familiar to a lot of coin people for his, his participation in the ANS and other organizations. The Archer M. Huntington Award that the ANS gives out is named after him. So with the letter, bronze examples, a handful had sold, but finding a silver one, I dug through auction archives at a bunch of different houses. I went on AC Search and Coin Archives, and I just wasn't finding anything. And so I estimated it at something like $500, and it ended up selling for something like $5,000, something like 10 times estimate, which again, I was thrilled. And it was a fantastic piece with a really cool provenance. The letter really added a lot for me. So those are just examples of pieces where I've been really thrilled. I mean, we actually sold Doyle and we got the Peel family collection of paintings. The Peels were a famous American painting family. We had a Mary Jane Peel portrait of a formerly enslaved woman named Phyllis, which was estimated at $5,000 to $8,000. It sold for $349,750. So
wow.
Yeah, I mean, again, because something like that hadn't come to market, so the market was made by the sale of that painting. So I mean, it was a remarkable piece of art too. Original portraits of enslaved or formerly enslaved people are extremely rare. Mary Jane Peel is a name, within the sort of pantheon of American painters, maybe not like the absolute top of it, but the Peel family is certainly notable. So with the provenance and everything else, it was a fabulous painting, and the subject matter, which was extremely rare. And so that was another example, which not numismatic. It's not a numismatic example, but it's to suggest that some pretty incredible results can happen. I mean, even against relatively conservative estimates.
Whew, I love that.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, I would encourage folks to go look up. It's a very interesting story, actually. The painting is a fascinating piece of history.
Yeah, I'll have to look into it for sure. Yeah, there's a lot to dive into, Doyle. Yeah. And you guys are doing some incredible auctions, it sounds like. Yeah, so like when it comes to like the graded coin market, like I know like we talk about all the time, like in the last several years it's gone ballistic, with the price of metals going up. But like, what do you see kind of like the 20-year, since like basically the early 2000s, like how the market has come along, when it comes to like, people coming into the hobby, and like, is it affecting like, is it good for auctions, or, obviously it's a net positive, for more people to get into the hobby, but do you see like, a huge premium in the last like 20 years, 5 years, what's your take on kind of like what's going on?
Sure. I think the premium depends in some ways on the coin, in the sense that if there's a raw coin with exceptional eye appeal, a sophisticated bidder is going to see that, and a good cataloger is going to try to make a note of it if the coin hasn't been certified. The practice of certifying coins has become so common now. I mean, I don't know about a majority, but a vast number of the coins that cross the block, whether it's Doyle or anywhere else, slabbing coins is more or less standard, especially for a lot of U.S. material, and it offers advantages and disadvantages, which we could you could have an entire podcast series dedicated to the advantages and disadvantages of the advent of third-party grading. I tend to think, as far as a premium goes, the word that comes to mind is consistency, in the sense that, you know, if you have the coin certified, it's going, not only do you have a better chance of selling it, it's also easier in some ways to put estimates on it, because you're going to have a, you know, fairly large number of previous sales. If it's a relatively common issue, if it's something incredibly obscure, that's a different can of worms. We're talking about, you know, solid US type coins or rare dates that are certified. If that's what we're talking about, then I think that it allows the coins to sell more consistently, and it gives people a better sense of the market. And I think it, you know, I don't know that it necessarily makes it more predictable. I think it can. You know, again, but there might be a certified, you know, there might be a slab coin that, though, you know, technically nearly identical to another one, another, you know, same date, same grade, if the coin has some, you know, distinguishing feature, you know, exceptional strike, you know, great luster, fantastic toning, whatever the X factor is, you know, that coin may sell for more than one of its more, you know, I don't know, one of its less remarkable brethren, or a coin that is ostensibly very similar. So I like to think that, you know, the coin will realize, irrespective of whether selling is certified or not, that a coin will realize what it's worth, especially if the cataloger does a, you know, a reasonably good job describing it. As far as the premium, I tend to think that there is one, because I think it's safer to buy a certified coin, which I guess gets back to my notion of consistency, right? Because it obviates, to an extent, it obviates debate about what technical grade it receives. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I think about it.
Yeah. Chris, I'd like to get your opinion on collectibles in general, not only coins, but, you know, stamps, we'll throw sports memorabilia in there, antiques. What is your opinion on how they are shielded, or how they are protected against whether we have, you know, recessions, economic downturns, things of that nature? In your experience, since you've been in the business, do you feel that these collectibles, mid to higher end, I'm not talking about low end, but you know, do you see them being protected, or do you think that they are affected with the rest of the, like, let's say the stock market drops 40%, you know, and there's a, you know, black swan event, something like that? What's your opinion on that?
I mean, it varies based on the kind of collectible. I mean, some collectibles are more quickly fungible than others, right? Like, it's going to be harder to take a lot of, you know, antique American furniture and get them into a sale quickly and move them around. Whereas if you have an ounce of gold, you can go and liquidate that pretty quickly, right? So, and which is not to imply that, like, a 1 ounce bullion coin is not a collectible, but I'm saying that to suggest that some things are easier to sell than others. Sell quickly, that is. As far as a place to park money where it is sheltered from the vagaries of the world economy, high-end collectibles and antiques, I think, can be an effective shelter. I mean, it depends on what you buy. It depends on what market you're selling into. It also depends on how much the outer market, the overall market, is affected by those types of white swan events. Like, if you have a large collector base for a specific type of collectible, but then a big chunk of that base gets wiped out in a recession, or in, you know, that a certain amount of buying power is reduced by the black swan event, that, you know, that might happen, you know, then it might not realize as strong a price as it might have in a healthier economic time. But on the other hand, you know, most of this material will retain a certain baseline of value, because there will more than likely, again, I have to hedge a little bit because, you know, without talking about specifics, more than likely this material will retain its value because there will remain a buying public of a certain size that recognizes its value, or that has some interest in continuing to purchase things like that. And so I do think that those things can be a reasonable, you know, a place to park money that does feel fairly safe. With that said, you know, markets change over time. I mean, you know, there are markets that go up, obviously go up and down. And so, yeah, I'm not trying to, you know, describe collectibles, whether coins or anything else, as, you know, effective investment vehicles. They can be, but I think also people who buy them more casually, I think in a lot of cases, dealing effectively in these markets requires a degree of knowledge that, requires a really professional degree of knowledge to really make money and effectively to invest, right? Because people come to me and say, what coin should I invest in for great returns? And that's a loaded question because, the market you're selling into is based on people who collect what they like, right? I don't advertise coins myself personally, and people can advertise things as they like, but I don't personally try to advertise rare coins, as an example, as a great investment vehicle. You can make money. You can certainly buy coins well, make money doing it. Absolutely. But I especially on the selling side, I tend to encourage people to think of these things as collectibles. Buy what you like, right? And again, they're institutional collectors and investors and things. That's a different ballgame. But again, sorry, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's just how
it does. I think of the time, like the most recent time that I can use that as an example was when COVID hit and the markets took a hit, and states were closing down and businesses were shuttering. But our business, we almost doubled in our business, the amount of business we were doing. And so I found that pretty fascinating, that in times of uncertainty, people just wanted to have, I guess it boils down to, because I've thought about this many, many, many times, and I'm always thinking about like where, money's always trying to find a home, and it's the good stuff always will have value, and the people that can afford the high end stuff always seem to have the money to buy it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying my question wasn't advocating that people just go buy coins as your retirement or anything like that.
Sure.
Because for the most part the high collectibles, especially with the higher end, they're not illiquid, but it's not like bullion where you could just flip it quickly that day. It takes time, and so there's a certain amount of in my mind protection there. But like you said, you have to make sure that you're getting the right materials, you're buying the right products, you're owning the right product, you're working with people that really know their business, like yourself, like us over here. And so I don't know, I just see that in my personal experience in the last 10 years, it just seems like more and more money is flowing into the collectibles universe. And I have different theories on why that is. One of them is just because the markets have done so well, aggregate over the last 10 years. A lot of new wealth has been created, whether it's through let's say the stock market, the real estate, or even just governments around the world creating more fiat currency that just gets thrown into the soup. And so that money gets spent. And I when we started the show, we were talking about Pokemon cards, which that's an absolutely huge marketplace now. And so, and that's a younger demographic than obviously than what our demographic, our customer base is 50 and up for the most part. And so I love that that Pokemon cards exist, and that is a robust and vibrant market, because to me it's a collectible, and whether it's Pokemon cards or coins or stamps or fill in the blank, comic books, it brings people into the fold of the collectible universe. And they might start with Pokemon cards, and you mentioned earlier there has been some crossover Pokemon and coin, and the U.S. Mint has been trying to get younger people interested by working with DC Comics, creating different coins with Spider-Man, Superman, Wonder Woman, and they've been very popular. And we've had them and we've sold them, and so it's I'm always just trying to think about that and the market as a whole, and yeah, it's just there's a lot of opportunity out there, but you really need to be careful. Especially people that are just getting into it, Like I heard a horrible story the other day of someone who inherited a lot of money. By a lot I mean a few $1,000,000, and he was taken for a lot of money because he started buying sports memorabilia, and he wasn't working with a reputable dealer and didn't do too much research on his own, kind of just trusted what he was being told. And so I hear things like that, and it's like, it's a horrible story, but it proves the point that you really need to, if you're not going to do the due diligence yourself, you really need to work with a professional who not only you can trust, but also that is very knowledgeable and experienced, or even better, do both. Do your own due diligence and work with a high-end professional in whatever area of collectability that is.
Absolutely true, and that's a big value add for an auction house, as you guys know, as many of the listeners probably know. That's a huge value add. Is that, whether it's on the selling side, where your material, from a seller's perspective, the material is being exposed to a broad buying public, whether it's a combination of collectors, dealers, museums, and cultural institutions, some combination thereof. Your material is only being put in front of a reasonable, a large audience, but also auction houses and reputable coin dealers and reputable collectibles dealers of any kind will stand by the authenticity of the products that they sell, and that's really important. And that's where third-party certification becomes important. On the sports memorabilia side here, I really will not sell autographed material that I haven't had looked at by Beckett or PSA or someone, because ultimately the without a good cert, my instinct is with autographed material is to not trust it unless there is some kind of incredibly strong provenance. But even then, that's a caveat I even hesitate to add. Like, to me, there needs to be a cert of some kind, and a reputable one at that.
Yeah.
So so that's vitally important. And so so the value add of a coin dealer or a coin auctioneer or an auction house, anything like that, is that it does establish that relationship of trust, and that it creates a reasonably responsible market, and that's that's very, very important. So I take that seriously.
I did have one quick question. I know I'm getting off the track, Dustin, but you mentioned museums. How does that work? Do you sell directly to museums, or do they participate in the auctions? And if it's direct, do you get a product in, and certain museum they have a showcase of these products, and you'll get in touch with whoever does procurement there? Like, how does that world work?
You offered a good summary right there. I mean, if the museum or library, cultural institution, whatever type of organization it is, has an acquisitions budget, and if something that we're selling is in their wheelhouse or might be in their wheelhouse, then absolutely, we definitely encourage folks at a wide range of institutions to participate. And and sometimes museums will deaccession things, and as they deaccession things, they might consign it to an auction house. That's especially if it's an auction house that's well known for whatever their specific material is. So there's absolutely a relationship between auction houses and cultural institutions of different kinds, and it can be beneficial for everybody.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, we're coming up with the hour. I had one more question before we dove into the community questions. I don't know if you have like about 10 minutes extra
Sure.
here.
Yeah, I've got as much time as you guys need.
All right, John, you have a dead stop, or you got a little bit of time?
10 minutes is good.
Okay, cool. Okay, we got one more question here before we get to the community questions. So, like, what's your perspective on like the market condition? Like, what's it look like for auction houses such as Doyle in the next like few years? Do you see like specific collections coming in? Now, like maybe like we were mentioning earlier, like errors and like all these kind of turn of the hands per se, like now newer generations coming into the fold, like their family members. Like, what do you see some of those collections coming in now, and like what's that look like for the next few years?
Sure. I mean, we're always pursuing estates, collections, individual consigners, and the market's been strong. I mean, the people are paying $350,000 for for paintings. So not to be flip, I'm just using that as one example. So the market is fairly strong, and the material, and a wide range of materials coming into it. One thing that I think ties some of the themes we're talking about together a little bit that I was thinking when John was mentioning, Pokemon cards bringing in a new audience, and this is something that I don't have a concrete answer about this. This is just something that I think about, is sort of the culture of collecting, because let's use coins, our industry as an example. The culture of collecting coins has changed over time. Now, some things are eternal. You'll always have certain key dates that are always going to command a strong price. You'll always have people trying to build high-end sets of any specific coin series. There are certain patterns that are, if not universal or eternal, at least incredibly consistent. So you'll always have some degree of interest. But it strikes me that there seems to be a shift, and again, I'd actually be curious for your guys' thoughts on this, that there's been a shift away from sort of circulation collecting, where in generations past, my parents' generation, my grandparents' generation, a parent and kid might together try to put together a set of Lincoln sets, and they might start with the coins they could have picked out of circulation, 30s, 40s, 50s dates, common things, and put them into a Whitman album, say. That type of collecting, maybe more people are doing it than I see, but certainly one of the things that drew me into collecting when I was very young was the state quarter program. And you mentioned, John, the U.S. Mint's sort of integration of pop culture into commemorative coinage and into U.S. coinage as a way of trying to appeal to a younger audience, or trying to suggest that the culture of coin collecting isn't just restricted to people that are spending a lot of money or who have certain more traditional sensibilities. What I'm really curious about, and this is where working at Doyle has been fascinating, is seeing how that culture has evolved in other collecting spaces. What was popular in the antiques world, any part of the antiques world, furniture, paintings, jewelry, anything else. Collecting tastes and trends evolve. And, in coins, it's certainly, I wouldn't pretend to know exactly where the market is going to go, but I think watching the culture and watching the way, not only the way that coins are marketed, but watching the way that the market tries to reach new people can tell you a little bit about where it's going. And so, and so that's something, and that's part of the reason that, hobby media, which I have some can be sort of important, is trying to track those trends and trying to understand, even just tracing the development of different events in the hobby and where that might impact where the market goes.
That's great insight.
Yeah, it's always seeing that the younger generations coming into the fold. It's like, there's so many avenues to access, and John mentioned the Pokemon cards, and you mentioned, Chris, about the crossover, there's just so many different angles. But now that there's just so many options for collectors these days, it's like there's always something for someone, and there's a niche right around the corner, so being that Pokemon cards resurgence, coins and precious metals, obviously it's affected the price. There's always going to be some niche in between. You collect fractionals or more Mormon coins, or European coins, or any of the ancient coins. They're all just going to eventually show up. Maybe not. Stick in the private collections. But yeah, so yeah, it's always good to hear that. Okay, yeah, we have some good questions here. Just to go through them. We got about 7 minutes. Good morning, everyone. Excited. Thank you, Quentin. We got Accurate Coins. Hi, hit those likes, everybody. Be sure to subscribe. Can't forget to hit those. Hit the subscribe. Hit the
like, comment, and subscribe.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thanks for always bringing real experts on the show. Yeah, Christopher is really hitting some.
Yes, he is.
Sure.
A generous appraisal again.
Yeah, that's fair. You got to be, never realized how much registry sets move the market. Yeah, man. There's a lot going on here. Let's see. Do auction prices really affect true value or hype? I mean, we kind of touched that already. For the most part, this consensus is yes and no. It could affect it negatively. It can impact it. Price discovery. So, kind of goes both ways.
I guess the only thing I would ask the questioner is, what do you mean by hype? I mean, certainly there are people that are trying to push certain products and will use, auction results to do that. But that doesn't also mean that the auction results are illegitimate reflections or not accurate reflections of the market. So, depends what you mean.
Yeah, there's a bias there for sure, if there is. Love hearing the behind the scenes auction process from Doyle. That's
My pleasure. And if anyone has any questions, I'm pretty easy to reach.
Yeah, reach out LinkedIn. You can find Christopher Bulfinch on LinkedIn. Also,
Yeah,
check
LinkedIn.
out
Yeah. Oh,
Doyle.com.
yeah.
There
I've
you
got
go.
a page on the website, and yeah.
Check them out.
Yeah.
Let's
And who's
see.
got questions? I'm always happy to chat with folks.
For sure. Yeah, you're definitely very knowledgeable. Definitely wide range of topics. So it's good to have you here.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
What coin series do you think is the most manipulated by auction comps? Oof.
Oh, that's a really good question.
Yikes.
I don't know about most manipulated by. I guess I'd hedge to say that a series
I don't think
that is to some extent manipulated by auction comps. Also depends what you mean by manipulated. That's a whole other question.
Yeah, that's
but I would say that series whose hype are can be driven by auction comps. One thing, and again, I don't know if this is exactly what the questioner was asking, but something that I've noticed, and I'm sure you guys have noticed this too, is if there's ever a massive auction result for, I'm going to use Lincoln Cents as an example. Not that I think that they're particularly overhyped, but whenever there's a huge, a 1943 bronze cent crosses the block for $1 million, that happened years and years ago, and a 19 of the the rare 1982. I can't remember off the top of my head, large versus small. The 1982 Lincoln Cents that are the
large
as
T.
they were changing the letter size and the composition exactly.
Hmm.
Whenever those types of things cross the block, I will inevitably get a lot of people reaching out with things that are not the thing that sold, if that makes sense. Like folks will reach out with like a 1944 wheat cent, very fine. I'm like, all right, this is worth a few cents. Like,
Yeah.
But then there will be this it will leave this sort of impression in the minds of people who might not know much about coins. It leaves the impression that, well, no, I have the rare thing too. And you often have to be the bearer of bad news and say, well, no, in point of fact, you don't. And so it's great. It's great to advertise the hobby, and it's great to advertise the industry with really high auction results. That's fantastic. And it's great. It brings new people in. I will say it can also, it will bring in a lot of folks who might not totally understand what they have. And so I find, and not that necessarily generates an undue amount of hype about Lincoln Cents, but more that it generates an amount of interest that doesn't always translate into better property coming to market either. Or it does. I mean, and then some folks will look and will find something really valuable. So again, I don't know if that answered the question precisely, but that's something I think about.
Yeah, that's valid.
I always like to say, just because it's old doesn't mean that it's valuable. And
Absolutely.
I'm the bearer of bad news. I can't even tell you how many times a day people call. Oh, I have this. It's 19 whatever it might be. 1940, like you said, 1944 penny wheat bag, and it's like, okay, it's worth a couple cents, but I saw it online for $2,000. Okay. Sorry, not what it's
well, exactly, and that's where less regulated auction platforms, certain online places, where folks will just put up a worthless coin and just slap a price on it, and then other people will Google it and see that, and then that it creates a unrealistic expectation.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, it's happening on eBay right now with Pokemon cards. People are selling cards that are worth thousands for really low. And they have, I showed John the card. I bought the one card. I realized what they were doing. They're trying to bring the price down. So they're trying to get the sales. They don't care about the money. Yeah. So when they do the sale, there's no feedback. There's nothing on that account. And then, a week later, a couple days later, it's like, oh, this account has been removed off of eBay. And it's like, you have to demand for a refund and all that. But I realized their focus is to bring the market down. By selling really low priced high end cards. So yeah, that's been happening for about 2 or 3 months. I've seen. Let's see. Let's get some more questions. We got a couple minutes here. Makes me rethink. That's exactly how I use eBay sold comps now. Yeah, that's valid. Yeah, I mean, they're kind of everywhere. Let's see. Christopher brought some serious knowledge tonight. Yeah, well, appreciate you.
That's kind of you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for joining us this week. We had some questions. Who was that? I think it's from LinkedIn. We have Matthew. Speaking of Chris mentioning curiosity numismatics, ancient Greek, Roman coins in particular, what will feed curiosity, as there are always discoveries being made. A lot of known ancient people from uh, iconography on coins such as propaganda. Ancient coins are covered in mere red book. It's broad to have them read multiple volumes, reference guides, as well as academic articles. That's a long one there, Matthew. Um, yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
there's a lot of.
Well, I mean, numismatics courses are often a part of academic training for medievalists or classicists. I mean, because you can use coins to date certain ancient sites. You can use them to establish the existence of trade networks between different regions of the world. If you find a coin from a specific city or city state or wherever, and if you find it in a far-flung place, that indicates that that there may have been a trading relationship there. So it's for the study of the Middle Ages and antiquity. It is coins are vitally important for that, and that's had I ever gone to graduate school, I don't know that I necessarily would have specialized in the ancient world, but there's it's incredibly coins are, like I said, central to a lot of academic disciplines. So that's a fair insight.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. I think he's going to join us at some point on the show. Last one: descriptions such as underestimated skill working with it for first time at Bassani's auction house. It can be rather challenging to execute every point on every lot the whole time. Something I coming to appreciate when looking at other auctions. Underestimated
Thank you.
skills. Yeah, well, thanks for your input. Appreciate it, John. New to the show, be sure to subscribe to us. We're going to have a special guest with us. Christopher, if you would like to join us, we'll have a panel with other guests that we've had on here before. If you'd like to join us.
Sure,
Yeah,
I'd love to.
it's fun.
It's fun. It gets deep. Like there's a lot of people on screen. That's crazy.
I'd be game. No, I'd love to be involved.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I'd love to have you on. Okay, yeah. So we're coming up to the end of the talk here. We like to leave everyone some final words. What's going on? We'll start with Chris. What's going on with you? What's going on with Doyle? Any insights for our guests or our viewers? Like, is there anything you can leave them with? Any advice? I don't know.
No, absolutely. I'm grateful to be here. Thanks so much, guys. I've listened to the show before, and I certainly am grateful to be able to speak with you guys and to chat about my work at Doyle. Our next coin sale is currently scheduled for August 12th, so I would encourage folks to. We have a really wide range of material in the sale, so I would definitely encourage folks to check it out. Certainly. Writing an auction catalog like that is the culmination of a lot of the efforts that we discussed here today. So yeah, check out the sale on August 12th. I'm like we said, I'm fairly easy to reach. If folks have any questions about the auction process, if they have material that they have any interest in consigning, obviously I'm available. And again, very grateful to be here with you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Christopher. Yeah, appreciate you joining us again. There was just last week. There's some time constraints, but the show.
Yeah, well, your patience, your patience is deeply appreciated.
Yeah, no, I love that you came back, and yeah, it's always good to have experts such as yourself on here. Yeah, I'm excited for a panel because I love those panels, and we're gonna bring ANA educators and some younger numicists. Yeah, it's really cool. John, what is going on with you this week? Anything we have? What's hot off the press? What's cooking?
Yeah, we have. Next few weeks are going to be very busy. The Mint is producing some amazing products.
Yeah.
On the 28th, the Enhanced Gold Eagles is coming out. It's always a few weeks until we get ours back from the grading companies, but we're going to start taking pre-orders on those, and then. Shortly after that, we have the Best of the Mint series. The first one is the 1916 Mercury Dime. The gold one, we're going to be getting those in-house. That's so pretty much by the end of June, we'll be able to start shipping. I'm not sure if we're going to have PCGS or NGC or both. We'll see. And then July 9th, we have the Morgan Silver Dollar Reverse Proof. That's a series. There's 6 coins. They have the reverse proof. the proofs, and then the business strikes, the mint states. So those are always that's always an exciting thing. We here at American Coin have the exclusive on the Damstra signature pieces in advanced release. So those always sell very quickly. We have customers that have been buying them since they started this in 2021 to mark the 100th anniversary of the end of the Morgan and start of the peace dollar. And so we're just gonna have it's gonna be very, very busy here, which we love. And like I say every week, for our friends, our viewers, our guests who are watching, if you find value in what you're hearing and listening to, please subscribe, like us. It really helps us out to bring you this valuable information. And just thank you again, Chris, for being a part of this. And I can't wait to for you to come back and be a part of the panel.
Yeah.
I'd love to do that anytime.
Fantastic. Yeah, we're here 1 p.m., 10 a.m. Pacific every Thursday. Give us a call 561-310-8341. You need coins at gmail.com. You can find us on Linktree, American Coin, ACC, eBay, American CC. Find us on Google, Yelp, Apple Maps. We're everywhere. Find us on all major platforms. We're on Spotify as well. We just uploaded the first 4 episodes of our show, and we're going to be on major platforms as well as Apple podcasts. So check us out. We are everywhere. You can't hit no corner without seeing American Coin and Currency. And a special thanks to Christopher Bullfinch here from Doyle. You guys are having auction house. When is it? August
12th is the next sale.
August 12th. Be sure to check out the auctions from Doyle. That's doyle.com. You can find Christopher Bullfinch on LinkedIn. You can see it. If anything, you got any questions for Christopher, definitely contact him. He's an expert. So yeah, we're gonna leave you guys with little goodbyes here. This episode is from American Coin and Currency live podcast, how auctions change the price of coin. We're gonna see you guys on the next one, and have a great weekend. Goodbye.
Goodbye.